One of our mules. And that's a really good point that he pointed out. That was a very good decision on Dusty's part. So now he's in a strange and a new environment, and over there there's trail stuff going on, and he kind of took a second and looked over there, got focused, and got back to what he was doing. That's what we really want from our horses, is that kind of focus, that kind of attention, that kind of a desire to do what we want them to do.
A lot of people ask me about, does all your horses do just tricks? They ride it too. And I would point out that very much riding and packing in the high country, you can carry about 200 pounds a year. Carry more than a mule can, and sometimes we just switch off depending on the load and the terrain. And we pack, strike, and whatever we need to do.
And that's a good point, teaching them that's fun stuff and silly stuff, but it is the same stuff. Training is training is training. Even though we're more accustomed to riding and the things that we traditionally assign to horses, it all is just training is training. And honestly, one of the things that, when I first started my business, by the way, I don't even know if I said this part, my name is Shauna Karish, and I'm here to teach you about positive reinforcement training. You should teach them to set it, on the ball and leave it even. But anyway, so when I first started my business years ago, when I left the marine mammal world and started looking into horses at the encouragement of Tom Dorrance, so I looked into horses and I wasn't sure exactly what to do. And so I was talking to somebody who, a woman and her husband, it's John and BZ Mann, and BZ Mann is a 3-time Olympian and gold medal winner in show jumping. And so the first week we worked together, I worked with the horses just to see how we would all get along. I only did stuff in their stalls. I mean, all I did was teach them about the clicker and touching a target, very simple stuff. At the end of that week, even though the training I did never left the stall, and the training that BZ was doing under saddle in the arena never interacted, she reported at the end of the week that those 8 horses that I was working with were remarkably better with their arena work. And the only thing that had been different and consistent between the 8 of them was that the introduction of just teaching them simple little things. So there's something into it, look, he's just taking it to town. There's something in there for it that really is pleasing to them, and some working on other behaviors will fix other behaviors a lot of times or improve other behavior. That wasn't direct, let's say. It's what? Oh, one of her best tricks. So he says, upstage me, shall you? Okay, well that was excellent. Thank you. How about a big hand for Dusty and Sophie? Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much for coming out here. And we'll visit a little later, too, if you want to, we want to kind of figure out something else you might want to do with them in any other way. But Jerry has done a terrific job with them and doing the positive reinforcement. So it kind of gives you an example of some of the things that they can do. And what I like about I also train my horses just to do fun stuff. I mean, I trained them all the under saddle and serious stuff as well, but I've taught them a lot of fun stuff because I like that. When you can watch a horse, like if I ask my horse Mint to back up, I'll give him one cue from the ground, I'll ask back up, he will back up and back up and back up and back up at a pretty good pace until he gets to the end of the arena. When he gets to the end of the arena, if he doesn't hear a click, he just turns the corner and goes along the fence. He hears at the other corner and doesn't hear a click, he goes around the corner and sees it. That's from one signal, and it's only been taught with positive reinforcement. So what I like about that, I do. Should I feed him? No, yes, you should go to you. He would never leave me then. And that's a good point. He said this is what we need to work on, is him staying with him instead of going to the new lady. But anyway, so but why I like the teaching something like the back up or the spin or the hop or the smile or the kicking the ball or the retrieving, it shows when we've asked for one cue and then they maintain that cue until we ask for another cue. So when I ask for my horse to go at 8 miles an hour with this much of a bend, I want them to think, okay, well, I'll just keep this. This is what we're working at. As opposed to me constantly having to say, go, go, slow down, bend, bend, soften, soften. So that, I think it's very demonstrative when you can just send one cue and they maintain that behavior. So I like to do that kind of stuff because I think it shows how much we can teach them to willfully want to do, to participate and work with us. When we use positive reinforcement, we can really change how they feel about working and the outcome of the training. And that's one of the real beauties of it. So let me give you, thank you guys. So let me give you a little background about what we're going to see today. How many of you guys are brand new to this? Okay, so I'm going to give you a little rundown so you know what we're talking about, what you're seeing, because it can just seem like a foreign language if you don't know. So, okay, so I started my career with animals actually at SeaWorld. So I learned to train the marine mammals. That was 84 to 94, so it's a long time ago, and I trained killer whales, dolphins, sea lions, walruses, otters, beluga whales. And so I got to do all kinds of things, but everything was done with positive reinforcement, and that is where I learned to train the marine mammals. Or that's where I learned about training animals. As a little kid, well, I won't even go into it this time, but anyway, so that's all I knew. So then, when I was, years later, Elizabeth Bush Burke of Anheuser-Busch owned SeaWorld at the time. She gave some of us trainers tickets to see a show jumping Grand Prix down in Del Mar. So we all went, and everybody's like, oh yeah, that was fun. And I was like, wait a second, I want to do that. So, I mean, I was jumping off the nose of killer whale, so it wasn't daunting to me to jump a 5-foot fence, but I didn't have a ride either. But anyway, so that is where I started looking into it. So I went and I was talking to Grand Prix show jumpers, and they were all like, oh, no, no, no. Horses aren't smart enough for that kind of training. It doesn't work with horses. It does, blah, blah, blah. And I heard 80,000 excuses from different people. So I thought, well, I haven't directly worked with horses, so I don't know if it'll work or not work, so I can't really say. But what I did know, I personally, with my own eyes, had seen target-trained hyenas, meerkats, hippos, rhinos, lions, tigers, goldfish, sharks. I mean, so I thought, well, I think a horse might fit in there somewhere, but because I kept hearing no, I didn't know. So I got this People magazine that had this story about a man named Tom Dorrance. Everybody know who Tom Dorrance is?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. So he's like the grandfather of natural horsemanship training. I had no idea what he was, but I just knew he sounded different than what I was hearing from people. So I called him on the phone, and he said, this is super exciting. You definitely need to move forward. I think it'll work with horses. It is, and he had used a little bit of food here and there, so he was very excited about it, said definitely move forward and do it. And then he was so excited about it, he even invited me to come to his ranch and work with him. Now, I was in the middle of working at SeaWorld, and I didn't know who he was. I was like, I have to work, I didn't really kind of get that would have been an awesome opportunity. But he's very, very gracious, and he sent me a signed book, and it was very sweet. But what I learned from him, one, is he gave me the encouragement to move forward, and two, he also, taught me that there's still more to learn. No matter what we know now, there is always more to learn. Every time I teach a clinic, I teach a demo, I learn something new from all of them. I just continue to learn. So I really love that about him, and that's one of the lessons I've really taken home and taken to heart and really appreciate. So from there then, I got Beezy and John Madden, heard about the training. Beezy and we just talked over dinner, because they live back east, and they show up and down throughout the world, actually. She's international. But anyway, so John heard about the training, and as we were sitting over dinner, and he was really interested, and he said, And so he took home a clicker I had left over from SeaWorld years ago, because we don't use clickers at SeaWorld anymore, or we didn't back then, I don't imagine they do now. And Beezy had a horse who was terrified of a riding stick. You couldn't have the riding stick, somebody else couldn't have the riding stick. You couldn't be on the ground or on the back with a riding stick. And he said, so he called the next day and said, okay, within one day, I got the horse to not only touch the riding stick, I can't get him to stop. And he said, if it is that big of a yes, or that big of a no, turned to that big of a yes, that fast, there's a place for this in Grand Prix show jumping. So I went there, I lived there, I moved there, and that's where I spent a year learning how, it was like my lab time. How do we put it together? How do we mix